Contact, East Ridge, moving fast. The night erupted in fire before Sergeant Kane could finish his warning. Tracer rounds carved red arcs across the black Kandahar sky, burning streaks of death slashing through the dust. The deafening crack of machine gun fire ricocheted through the valley as the squad dove for cover behind jagged rocks, their boots skidding on loose gravel. The air reeked of cordite and blood, thick and metallic, as if the earth itself was bleeding. Private First Class Morales, barely 22, pressed his back to the stone and whispered prayers into his trembling hands. His lips moved silently, but Kane saw the fear painted across his face. The boy was good, sharp eyes, steady shot, but too young to understand that prayers meant little here. Kandahar devoured faith, leaving behind only ghosts. A shadow moved across the ridge, too fast, too fluid to be insurgents. Kane's heart clenched. He blinked, tried to shake it away, but it lingered, tall, stretched, and wrong, as though the desert itself had conjured something not meant for this world. "Eyes on that ridge," Kane barked, his voice gravel over the chaos. "Keep your fire tight, no spray and pray." Staff Sergeant Holt, the squad's medic, crawled to Morale's side, pressing a hand against the boy's shoulder to steady him. Holt had seen too many like him, young men who brought photographs of high school sweethearts, promises of weddings, dreams that turned to dust beneath Afghan skis. Holt's own photograph, creased and sweat-stained, never left his chest pocket, though the face on it no longer waited for him. His wife had stopped writing after his second tour, yet he still carried her smile as if it were armor. The firefight slowed, replaced by the eerie silence that haunted nights in Kandahar. No birds, no insects, only the desert breathing in its heavy stillness. The ridge was empty again, as though nothing had ever been there. Kane's pulse hammered against his temples. He had led men through a dozen ambushes, but never had silence pressed so hard, like an invisible weight pinning him to the earth. Then came the scream, not human, not animal, a hollow, ragged howl that clawed across their nerves and left each man frozen. It came from the ridge, where shadows bent unnaturally, swallowing the moonlight whole. Morales broke first. "What the hell is that? Tell me you heard that, Sarge." His voice cracked, too loud against the silence. "I heard it," Kane replied, his tone clipped. He wouldn't let the fear spread, not when panic killed faster than bullets. Yet he felt it too, that primal, marrow-deep dread that no training could harden against. The squad regrouped, circling tight, weapons trained on the ridge. Sweat clung to their skin beneath the heavy armor, stinging their eyes, burning their throats with the taste of salt and grit. Holt muttered under his breath, fragments of an old hymn his mother used to sing when storms rolled across Texas. The words were lost to the wind, but the rhythm lingered, a heartbeat against the silence. Kane raised his night vision goggles, scanning the horizon. No heat signatures, no movement, only shifting shadows that seemed to crawl when he wasn't looking directly at them. His gut twisted, the kind of instinct honed through years of war. Something was wrong, something was watching. He remembered the whispers from locals in the villages they passed, old men who spat in the dust when soldiers asked about the mountains, women who clutched their children tighter as patrols walked by. They called this valley cursed, claimed spirits walked at night, feeding on the living. Kane had dismissed it as superstition. But now, with the air heavy and the men trembling, doubt crept in like smoke through cracks in stone. The squad pressed on, moving deeper into the valley. Their mission was clear: recon a supply route rumored to be funneling weapons. Yet clarity of orders did little to quiet the storm of fear unraveling in their minds. As they advanced, the desert seemed alive. Rocks shifted with no wind. Sand hissed like whispers carried on unseen currents. Each step echoed louder than it should. Each shadow stretched longer, reaching for them with unseen fingers. Morales flinched at every sound, his knuckles white around his rifle. Holt kept close, not for cover, but to anchor him, to remind the boy he wasn't alone in this hell. Kane, leading at point, felt the eyes of his men on him, waiting for strength he wasn't sure he still carried. The weight of command pressed heavier than his pack. And then they found it. A ruin buried in the sand, its stone walls cracked but standing, carved with symbols none of them recognized. The entrance yawned like the mouth of some ancient beast, breathing cold air that smelled of earth and rot. No intel had mentioned this. No map marked it. Kane raised a fist, signaling a halt. His men froze, weapons trained outward, but every gaze drifted back to that black opening in the earth. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the desert moved around them, whispering secrets they could not understand. "Orders, Sarge," Holt finally asked, his voice low, controlled, but his eyes betrayed the flicker of fear. Kane swallowed the lump in his throat, tasting dust and blood. He wanted to tell them to turn back, to call in and let command deal with whatever this was. But he knew command would never believe them, and he knew something waited inside that ruin, something tied to the whispers, the shadows, the scream. "Stack up," Kane said at last, his voice a steel mask over the storm inside. "We're going in." The desert seemed to hold its breath as the squad formed up at the mouth of the ruin. Darkness swallowed them whole as they stepped into the abyss, rifles raised, every heartbeat echoing like thunder in their ears. And behind them, the wind carried another scream, closer this time. The air inside the ruin clung damp and heavy, tasting of stone and something older, something that had no name. The beams of their weapon-mounted lights cut through the dark in narrow cones, illuminating carvings etched deep into the walls, spirals, jagged lines, crude figures of men with hollow eyes and twisted limbs. Private Morales muttered under his breath, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "This isn't Taliban work, this is ancient, real ancient." "Shut it," Kane hissed, though not unkindly. He needed silence more than he needed speculation. Every syllable here felt like a trespass, and the ruin itself seemed to listen. The squad moved in pairs, boots crunching against loose gravel and shards of stone. The floor sloped downward into a narrow hall, and the further they descended, the colder the air grew. Their breath began to fog, hanging white in the light beams. Afghanistan's nights could cut sharp, but this was different, unnatural, like walking into a crypt buried far beneath the earth. Sergeant Holt slowed, pressing 2 fingers to the walls. His gloves traced the carvings. He'd spent enough time patching bodies to recognize the truth hidden in crude lines, figures pierced with arrows, torsos split open, eyes gouged. This wasn't art. It was memory, etched violence meant to be remembered. "Looks like they recorded massacres here," Holt whispered, his voice betraying unease. Kane ignored the shiver crawling up his spine and signaled the squad forward. "Eyes front, stay sharp." The hallway opened into a chamber. Their lights revealed a vast circular space, the ceiling vanishing into darkness. Pillars rose like broken teeth, carved with the same figures. At the center lay a pit, ringed with shattered stone, as though something had burst out rather than been sealed within. The men stopped as one. Even the desert wind seemed absent now, leaving only their breaths and the faint creak of gear. Something dripped in the distance, slow, steady. Morales couldn't take it. He lowered his rifle slightly, trying to slow his breathing, but it only grew louder in his ears. He saw his sister's face, small, framed in the kitchen window the night he shipped out. She had begged him not to go. He had laughed then, brushing it off. But standing here, facing shadows carved in stone, he felt that plea tighten around his chest like a noose. Kane crouched at the edge of the pit, shining his light down. The beam fell into emptiness, swallowed without end. He expected to see stone, rubble, dirt, anything solid. But the darkness moved, shifting like smoke, like water. His light refused to hold. Behind him, Holt spoke. "This isn't right, Kane. Places like this, they aren't supposed to exist." "Neither are the screams we heard," Kane replied. His voice was calm, but his throat was dry. He stood, turning to address the squad, when a low vibration trembled through the ground. Dust trickled from the ceiling, their gear rattled softly, then it stopped. But from the pit came a sound. Not the howl from the ridge, not the echo of wind. This was softer, broken, like voices overlapping, hundreds of whispers spoken at once. They rose, fell, tangled into a language none of them knew, yet the meaning pressed against their skulls, heavy, insistent. Morales covered his ears. "Make it stop. Jesus Christ, make it stop." "Hold your ground," Kane barked, pulling the boy upright, his grip iron. But the truth was clear. Each of them heard it, felt it clawing into their bones. Holt's lips moved unconsciously, mouthing the rhythm of the voices. His mind reached for reason, for logic, but found none. His father had been a preacher. He had walked away from church years ago. Yet here now he wanted scripture. He wanted something greater than his rifle. A shape stirred at the bottom of the pit. The darkness rippled, then coalesced, rising slowly. At first it seemed formless, a shadow without edges. Then it twisted upward, stretching into limbs too long, a torso too thin, a head that bent unnaturally to the side. Its eyes glowed faintly, not like light, but like embers hidden beneath ash. The squad opened fire. The chamber erupted in thunder, muzzle flashes strobing the ancient walls. Rounds tore into the shadow, ripping holes that closed almost instantly, like smoke healing itself. The thing did not flinch, did not stumble. It only climbed higher, each movement wrong, as if the body itself was an echo of something that had forgotten how to be flesh. Kane's stomach knotted. The thing was not insurgent. It was not man. Yet it was here, in this ruin, and it had chosen them. "Fall back," he ordered, his voice cut through the gunfire. "Out of the chamber, move." The squad pulled back, weapons still firing, bullets sparking off stone. The whispers grew louder, swelling into a chorus that pressed so hard against their skulls some men stumbled, clutching their heads. Holt dragged Morales when the boy faltered, his own breath ragged. As they crossed the threshold of the hall, the whispers cut off. The vibrations ceased. Silence crashed back into the ruin with brutal force. The chamber was still again, empty. Kane turned, chest heaving, rifle raised. The pit was as it had been before, dark, unmoving, bottomless. The shadow was gone. Yet the silence wasn't relief, it was promise. Kane's voice was low, steady when he spoke. "This place is wrong. We report it, we mark it, we never come back." Holt met his eyes, jaw tight. "And what about what we just saw? You think Command will believe that?" Kane didn't answer. He knew the truth. Command wouldn't care. They'd send more men, more lives into this ruin, and whatever lived in that pit would feed again. But as they regrouped at the entrance, preparing to leave, Morales froze. His light caught on the wall near the exit. Fresh carvings. Lines carved shallow into the stone. A soldier's figure, his own squad's outline, 8 men standing at the mouth of the ruin, rifles raised. And behind them, a shadow reaching out. The boy's voice cracked as he whispered, "That's us." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence in the ruin was heavier than gunfire. Each man stared at the crude carvings freshly gouged into the wall, their figures unmistakable, drawn in the same jagged style as the massacres they had passed earlier. Kane's mouth went dry. The grooves in the stone were sharp, the edges still flacking as though carved minutes ago. That was impossible. He forced himself to breathe slowly, but his chest felt like a vice was clamped around it. "Eyes off the wall," Kane ordered, forcing steel into his voice. "It's a trick, just a trick." Morales shook his head violently, the beam of his rifle-mounted light jerking across the wall. "That's us, Sarge, look at it. It's us walking out, and that thing, it's behind us. How the hell does Stone know we're here?" "Morales," Kane snapped. The young private flinched, swallowing the panic rising in his throat. Kane locked eyes with him, holding him steady. "We move now, we get out, that's an order." The squad pulled into formation, weapons sweeping the ruin as they advanced toward the entrance. Every shadow felt like it was shifting, every scrape of boots echoing too loudly. Holt kept close to Morales, practically dragging him forward, while Corporal Singh covered the rear, his jaw clenched so tight it looked ready to crack. When they stepped back into the open desert air, it was like surfacing from a nightmare, but the night outside was no less cruel. The wind had picked up, hissing through the rocks like whispered warnings. The moon hung pale and distant, a sickly coin barely piercing the clouded sky. Kane checked his watch, frowning. They'd only been inside the ruin 20 minutes, but his body told him different. His legs ached as though he'd been running for hours. His tongue felt swollen with thirst, though he'd sipped water before entering. He could see the same exhaustion on his men, the hollows beneath their eyes, the way their shoulders sagged. "Form up, we're exfiling north," Kane said. His words were clipped sharp. "Radio check Singh, call it in." Singh raised his handset, thumbing the mic. "Static." He adjusted frequencies, repeated, nothing. The hiss of white noise filled the air. "Dead line," Singh muttered, his voice flat but his hands shaking, like something jamming us. Kane's stomach turned. No insurgent tech out here could blanket them so completely, not in this valley. He fought to push the thought aside. He had to stay focused, had to keep the men focused, or fear would eat them alive. "Then we move in silence," Kane said. "We make the rendezvous by dawn." They began the march, boots crunching against gravel, rifles raised against the shifting dark. Every dune looked like a crouched figure, every ridge like a sniper's nest. Morales muttered half prayers again, fragments of Spanish threading into the Afghan wind. Holt walked beside him, steady and deliberate, his eyes forward, but his ears tuned to every breath Morales took. As they moved, Kane drifted in his own head, replaying the shadow in the pit. He had seen men die in ways that tore at the soul, ambushes, IEDs, firefights where the world exploded into red mist. But this was different. What they faced in that chamber wasn't war, it wasn't human, and yet the ruin showed them, it knew them. The thought gnawed at him until he felt the bile rise in his throat. He pushed it down. He had to lead. He had to keep them alive. An hour into the march, the scream returned. It ripped through the valley like a blade, distant but echoing from everywhere at once. The squad froze, weapons swinging toward empty ridges, fingers white on triggers. The sound was raw, animal yet not, a sound no throat of flesh should make. Morales broke, firing 3 wild bursts into the darkness. Sparks flared against rock, echoes thundered back. "Cease," Kane roared, shoving his weapon down. Morales' chest heaved, eyes wide as coins, his whole body trembling. "It's following us," Morales whispered. "It's not staying back there, it's following us." "Eyes up, keep moving," Kane ordered, but even as he spoke, he knew Morales was right. Because the scream came again, closer. They quickened their pace, their formation tight, rifles searching every shadow. Holt moved to Morales' side, gripping the boy's arm to keep him steady. Singh scanned the rear, cursing under his breath in Punjabi, the syllables harsh against the silence. The desert stretched endless, each ridge bleeding into the next, as if the valley itself was shifting around them. Kane checked his compass. The needle spun, twitching, refusing to hold north. His throat clenched. They were being played with. The valley wasn't letting them leave. And then they saw the fires. Orange flickers ahead, swaying like torches, scattered across the ridge in patterns too deliberate to be random. Shadows moved behind them, tall and thin, their outlines warped. The men crouched, rifles trained, but the figures did not advance. They only stood, silhouetted against the flames, watching. Morales' voice cracked. "Sarge, they're waiting for us." Kane's lips pressed into a hard line. His finger itched against the trigger, but instinct screamed at him that to fire now was to unleash something worse. He swallowed hard, his throat raw from the desert air. "Change course," Kane said finally. "We cut east, move." The squad shifted, skirting wide, boots crunching fast as they angled away from the ridge. The fires burned behind them, flickering like eyes in the dark. The watchers did not follow, but their presence pressed heavy on every step. Hours bled into each other. The night stretched long, each minute drawn taut like wire. Morales stumbled twice, caught by Holt before he hit the ground. Singh's curses grew hoarse. Even Kane's legs burned, his thoughts fraying at the edges. When dawn finally brushed the horizon, it was not relief. The sun bled red through the haze, casting the valley in a sickly glow. And ahead, where the map promised a clear route north, lay another ruin. Larger, older, its silhouette jagged against the rising sun. Morales fell to his knees, whispering, No, we left it behind." Kane stared, chest hollow. The ruin stood where their path should have been, as though the valley itself had folded, reshaped, and trapped them in its gut. The squad stood in silence, the dawn light catching on their hollow faces. And then, faint but undeniable, the whispers began again. The whispers slid beneath their helmets like water slipping through cracks. They weren't loud, not like the scream, but they were constant, threads of sound tugging at the edges of thought, words not fully formed yet heavy with meaning. The men tried to ignore them, but silence had weight, and weight pressed until bones cracked. Morales covered his ears, rocking on his knees, his rifle clattering against stone. Holt knelt beside him, gripping his shoulders. "Breathe, Morales, look at me," Holt ordered, his voice low but sharp. "You're here, you're not back there, you're here." But Morales' eyes darted to the ruin ahead, wide and wet. "It's the same place, Sarge, it's the same place. We walked all night and we're back where we started. We're not getting out, we're not." Kane's hand cut the air like a blade. "Enough," his voice cracked like gunfire in the still morning. "You want to feed it, you want to give it what it wants. You shut your damn mouth and get back on your feet." Morales froze, chest heaving, but the authority in Kane's tone pulled him up as surely as a rope. His legs shook, but Holt steadied him. Kane turned to Singh, who hadn't said a word since dawn. The corporal stood stiff, his rifle trained on the ruin, his jaw flexing. Sweat ran down his temples despite the cold air. "Talk to me," Kane said. Singh finally spoke, his accent thicker now, his voice low and raw. "This valley isn't meant for us. The locals knew, they warned us with their eyes. You saw it, Sarge." His gaze didn't waver from the ruin. "We shouldn't be here." Kane wanted to agree. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to find a ridge, to dig in and pray for extraction. But turning back meant nothing here. The desert shifted beneath their boots, and the horizon folded into lies. The valley wasn't a place, it was a trap. "We stick to the mission," Kane said, though even as the words left his mouth, they tasted like ash. The squad pushed forward, skirting the ruin, refusing to look too long at its jagged mouth yawning toward them. The whispers grew louder near its walls, curling into their ears like fingers. Morales muttered fragments of Spanish prayers again, repeating the same two words over and over, "Perdoname, perdoname." The sun climbed higher, but its light gave no comfort. Heat rose from the stones, baking the men in their armor, but the air stayed thick and cold, as though the valley rejected the day. Sweat strung their eyes. Their canteens drained faster than they could risk. By noon, they were stumbling. Holt checked Morales' pulse, frowning at the rapid thrum beneath his fingers. Singh limped, blood seeping through his pant leg from a cut he swore he didn't remember getting. Kane forced himself to keep moving, each step dragging, his mind slipping into old ghosts. His brother's face surfaced, Ryan, gone in Iraq, blown apart by an IED Kane was supposed to clear. He hadn't thought of him in years, but now he saw Ryan's grin, his blood, his mangled body. The whispers pressed harder, feeding him the memory like it was a gift. He shook his head violently, forcing the vision away. But when he looked back at his men, he knew they were seeing their own ghosts. Holt's lips moved soundlessly, his eyes wet, fixed on something Kane couldn't see. Singh muttered in Punjabi, half snarled, half pleading. Morales clutched the photograph of his sister, holding it to his lips like a charm. The valley wasn't just twisting space. It was peeling them open, tearing through scars and stitching nightmares fresh. By the time the sun dipped again, they had found no way out. Only dunes folding into ridges, ridges curling into valleys, all circling back to the same ruin. When darkness fell, the fires returned. Farther this time, scattered across the horizon like a line of beacons. Behind them, shapes moved, silhouettes too tall, their limbs bending wrong. They didn't advance. They only stood, watching. The scream tore through the night once more, closer now. Morales broke. His rifle swung up, his finger locked on the trigger, his eyes wide with madness. "They're coming for us," he shouted, his voice cracking. He would have fired into the dark if Holt hadn't grabbed the barrel, shoving it down. "Morales, listen to me," Holt barked, shoving his face inches from the boy. "You fire and we're dead. You hear me? Dead." Morales shook violently, but Holt held him until the wildness in his eyes dulled to a tremor. Kane scanned the fires, his chest a drum of rage and fear. He had led men through chaos before. He had dragged bodies home, counted dog tags, written letters to families, but never had he felt so powerless, so stripped of control. He clenched his fists. "We move," he said. His voice was a whisper, but it carried. "We don't stop until something breaks, either us or it." The squad moved again, swallowed by the night. The fires burned behind them, the scream circling like a predator testing its prey. And as the moon rose high over Kandahar, the ruin they had left behind crumbled in silence, stones splitting, dust rising, until nothing remained but sand. Yet ahead, in the path they walked, another ruin waited. And its mouth was already open. They pushed forward into the night, every man carrying more than just his rifle. The air was heavy with fear, with sweat, with silence punctuated only by the crunch of boots on sand. The ruin loomed ahead, waiting like an open maw. Its jagged mouth seemed wider than before, as though the desert itself had reshaped to funnel them back. Kane raised a clenched fist. The squad froze, forming a loose circle. Their rifles swept the dunes, but no enemy presented itself, only shadows stretching unnaturally long beneath the pale moon. "We set perimeter here," Kane said, his voice low but steady. "No one goes near that ruin." Holt checked Singh's leg, Morale's eyes on the ridge. They moved mechanically, clinging to order because without it, madness was waiting. Holt knelt beside Singh, cutting open the torn pant leg. The gash was ugly, jagged, deeper than Singh had admitted. Dried blood crusted around it, but what made Holt's stomach tighten was the smell, faint, metallic, wrong, as if the wound carried rot though it was fresh. "You should have told me it was this bad," Holt muttered, pulling gauze from his pack. Singh looked away, his voice flat. "It wasn't this bad before. It was just a scratch, I swear it." Holt froze, his hands steady only through force of will. He didn't argue, didn't press. He had seen infections spread, seen flesh turn against its host, but this was different. This was fast, unnatural. He worked quickly, binding the leg, refusing to let his thoughts spiral into what it might mean. Across the circle, Morales muttered again, clutching his rifle tight. His whisper wasn't prayer this time, but something else, fragmented, jittery. Kane moved to him, crouching low, catching the boy's eyes. "Talk to me," Kane said, voice softer than command. "What do you hear?" Morales blinked, tears stinging his eyes. "She's calling me Sarge, my sister. She says I'm already dead. She says she saw my body on the news." His voice cracked, "but I can hear her like she's standing right here." Kane swallowed hard. He wanted to tell Morales it was just exhaustion, just the valley messing with his head. But the whispers in his own ears betrayed the lie. He heard Ryan, his brother, clearer than he had in 15 years. "You left me. You walked away while I burned." Kane clenched his jaw. "It's not her, you hear me? It's not her. The valley wants you to believe it, and if you do, it wins. You keep breathing, Morales. You keep fighting." The boy nodded, but his grip on the rifle never loosened. The squad rotated watch, though none truly slept. The desert played tricks, the fires on the horizon flickering, vanishing, returning. The scream rolling through the dunes, closer, farther, never constant. Twice, Kane thought he saw movement, tall figures at the edge of vision, vanishing when he raised his scope. By the time dawn cracked the horizon, they were broken men. Their eyes were bloodshot, their bodies sluggish. The ruin ahead stood unchanged, waiting, as if the night had been nothing but a long exhale before the valley's next trick. They moved on, dragging their bodies forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. Singh limped badly now, leaning on Holt. Morales walked hollow-eyed, the photograph of his sister clenched in his fist, the paper crumpled and damp with sweat. By midday, the sun blazed overhead, but its heat didn't touch them. The air remained unnaturally cold. Their canteens ran low. Every swallow burned their throats, yet no relief came. The whispers grew louder again, bleeding into words that formed and unformed in their skulls. Kane heard Ryan's voice, begging, accusing, screaming. Holt heard his wife, her last letter spoken aloud with venom that hadn't been on the page. Morales heard his sister's laughter turn to sobs. Singh muttered in Punjabi, his voice raw, like he was arguing with someone only he could see. They stopped beneath a ridge, too exhausted to push farther without pause. Holt tried to hand out rations, but the men gagged on the food, the taste bitter and rancid in their mouths. Morales spat his out, shaking. "It's poison," he gasped. "It's not real. None of this is real." Kane pressed his palms against his eyes, forcing himself to breathe, to stay tethered. He couldn't let go. If he broke, they all would. Then came the sound of boots. Not theirs. From the ridge above, a line of soldiers appeared, uniforms faded, gear mismatched. Their faces were obscured by shadow, but the way they moved was wrong, jerky, as though strings pulled them. They didn't descend. They only stood, staring down, rifles in hand. Morales raised his weapon, panic flashing. Contact. Hold, Kane barked, raising a hand. His stomach twisted. The figures didn't fire, they didn't breathe, they only watched. Holt whispered, voice trembling, "They look like us." Kane's chest clenched. He didn't answer, because Holt was right. The silhouettes above mirrored their own formation, 4 men, one limping, one clutching a smaller figure's shoulder. Reflections, ghosts, or worse. The figures lingered, silent, then stepped back and dissolved into the haze. Morales broke down, collapsing to his knees. Holt grabbed him, but the boy shook violently, his sobs tearing through the still air. Kane forced them forward again, though his own legs shook. The ruin waited, its shadow longer now, stretching across the sand like a wound. By nightfall, they reached its edge once more. The mouth yawned wide, cold air spilling from within, carrying the same rot as before. The whispers ceased. The silence was worse. Kane looked at his men, broken, trembling, their eyes hollow, and knew the valley had stripped them bare. He had no choice left. "We make camp at the entrance," he said, his voice hoarse. "We hold here. At first light, we go inside." No one argued. The ruin waited, and the valley held its breath. Night came down hard, pressing against them like the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes. The ruin loomed above, jagged against the moonlight, its mouth yawning wide enough to swallow the squad whole. They built a cold camp, no fire, no chatter, just the crunch of gear being set down and the faint click of rifle safeties disengaged. Even then, the ruin seemed to breathe, exhaling cold that turned their sweat into chill. Kane sat with his back to stone, rifle across his knees. His men were shadows around him, Holt wrapping Singh's leg again, Morales hunched over his crumpled photograph, Singh himself half-conscious but muttering in Punjabi words Kane couldn't catch. They were unraveling, and Kane was too. He had to admit that, even if only to himself. The voices hadn't stopped. Ryan's voice still coiled in his skull, whispering blame. "You left me. You should have been in that Humvee, not me." Kane pressed his palms hard against his eyes until sparks burst behind his lids. He whispered through his teeth, "Shut up, shut up." Holt moved quietly to his side. "You hear them too," he said, not asking. His voice was tired, ragged, stripped of the usual medic's calm. Kane looked at him, jaw tight. "Doesn't matter what I hear. What matters is keeping them breathing." Holt gave a humorless laugh. "Breathing doesn't mean alive, Sarge. You've seen it in their eyes. Hell, you've seen it in mine." His gaze flicked to the ruin. "This place isn't meant for us. We stay, it eats us. We leave, it still eats us. Feels like the valley's already decided." Kane said nothing, because Holt was right, and yet he couldn't say that aloud. If the squad lost even the illusion of hope, they'd shatter. A sound broke the silence, not the scream this time, not the whispers. Footsteps from the ruin. The squad whipped around, rifles trained on the black moor. The steps were slow, deliberate, echoing against stone. Morales' hands shook so badly the barrel of his weapon rattled. "Hold," Kane ordered, though his own voice trembled. A figure emerged from the darkness. For a heartbeat, Kane's breath caught in his throat. It was a soldier, uniform tattered but American, gear old, webbing torn. His helmet hung from one strap, and his face, God, his face, was gaunt, pale, eyes hollow like something had scooped them out but left the sockets glowing faintly. Morales gasped, "Jesus Christ." The figure raised a hand, palm outward, almost in greeting. His voice was a rasp, dry as sand scraping glass. "You shouldn't be here." Kane's gut twisted. His men froze, disbelief holding them hostage. Holt, ever the medic, took a half step forward. "Who are you?" The figure tilted his head, like he had forgotten the answer. Then, in a voice that cracked like broken stone, "We came before, we never left." He lifted his sleeve, showing the faded patch of the 10th Mountain Division. The stitching was frayed, the cloth nearly rotted. Holt's eyes widened. That's 20 years old. The figure lowered his arm, the glow in his eyes dimming. It doesn't matter. Once you've stepped into the valley, it keeps you. We thought we were on mission too, thought we could map it, fight it, win. He gave a dry laugh, hollow. But there's no winning here, only staying, only becoming. Morales broke, shouting, "You're lying, you're not real." He raised his rifle, finger twitching. The desert refused to sleep. The squad sat in silence around a dim red lamp, the kind designed to keep them hidden from afar. But nothing about the valley felt like it could be hidden. The wind carried a hiss, not quite words, but close enough to make Kane's shoulders tense with every gust. Singh's body lay wrapped in canvas a few feet away, silent, a weight pressing against the earth. Holt had taken the dog tags and muttered a prayer in a voice that cracked halfway through. Morales had tried to close Singh's eyes, but the lids refused to stay shut, as if even in death he had to keep watch. "Burial?" Holt asked at last, his voice low. Kane shook his head. "Not here, not in that ground." His tone was final. "We take him when we move." Morales spat into the sand, a shaky gesture of defiance. "If we live long enough to move." The words settled like dust. Kane wanted to snap, wanted to pull the squad back into line, but exhaustion dug too deep into their bones. He looked at Holt, calm on the surface, but his leg bounced, tapping against the sand in a rhythm too sharp to be nervous energy. Morales sat apart, arms wrapped around his rifle, his gaze darting to the ruin every few seconds as if daring it to move. Kane tried to focus, but his vision blurred again. His brother's face had appeared twice more since they'd fled the chamber. Ryan hadn't spoken this time, only stared. His eyes had been hollow, ringed in ash. A distant thump pulled him back, not close, but not natural either. Holt lifted his head immediately. "That's not wind," Holt said. The thump came again, a deep, resonant strike, as if something massive had moved underground. The sand beneath them shifted subtly, as though it breathed. "Tell me that's not artillery," Morales muttered. "No," Kane said. He knew the rhythm of artillery too well. This was slower, alive. The lamp flickered once, then died, plunging them into black. Holt swore, fumbling for his pack. But the dark was not complete. Light pulsed faintly across the ruin. Not fire, not glow. Something deeper, like veins beneath the stone, carrying black light through cracks that spread wider each second. "Gear up," Kane ordered, standing fast. "We move now." Morales hesitated. "Move where, Sarge? There's nowhere safe in this goddamn place." Kane didn't answer. Orders only mattered if men believed them, and he couldn't yet make himself believe. The ruin pulsed again, brighter, a heartbeat against the night. Then the sand in front of them shifted. Something pushed through, slow and deliberate, parting grains as though they were water. A hand emerged, thin, elongated, wrapped in tattered cloth. The fingers were bent, bones too sharp against stretched skin. Another hand followed, then the curve of a skull, eyeless and cracked. "Contact!" Holt shouted, raising his rifle. Kane's weapon was already up, muzzle flash splitting the night. Bullets tore into the figure, sending fragments of cloth and bone scattering. But it didn't fall. It kept rising, dragging itself free of the earth, taller than any of them, its mouth splitting open in a scream that shook the valley. Moory hands broke the sand around them. "Fall back," Kane barked. They moved in chaos. Holt fired controlled bursts, covering Morales as he scrambled up the slope. Kane dragged Singh's body despite every instinct telling him to leave it. He wouldn't. He couldn't. Figures pulled themselves from the sand, each one twisted, half-rotted, uniforms clinging to their frames. Some wore Soviet gear, rusted AKs still slung over shoulders. Others wore rags that might have been older still. Their eyes glowed faintly, not with light, but with absence, dark holes that seemed to swallow the fire from the rifles. "Jesus Christ!" Morales screamed, firing into the nearest one until its chest collapsed. Still, it staggered forward, reaching with hands that left trails in the sand. Holt shouted, "They're not stopping. What the hell are they?" Kane cut him off. Run. They crested a dune, stumbling over loose sand, weapons bucking in bursts meant only to buy space. The ruin pulsed brighter behind them, its cracks spilling black veins across the valley floor. Figures kept rising, pulled from the desert like seeds sprouting. Some collapsed after a few steps, their bodies too broken to hold. Others followed, slow but relentless, driven by something Kane didn't want to name. They pushed until their lungs seared, until Holt fell hard to his knees, dragging Singh's body half under him. Morales fired until his rifle clicked empty, then jammed another mag in with shaking hands. At last, the pursuit slowed. The figures lingered at the edges of the valley, packing like predators bound by invisible leashes. Their heads turned in unison, eyes fixed on the squad, but they didn't cross the line of shadow. Kane collapsed into the sand, chest heaving, the weight of Singh's body still pressing into him. Holt bent double, coughing hard, sweat pouring down his face. Morales sat back against the dune, his laugh high and broken. "They let us go," he said, voice wild. "You see that? They let us go." "No," Kane said. His voice was raw, throat torn by sand and fear. "They're waiting." The ruin pulsed again, in the distance. Kane looked at his men, what was left of them. Morales trembling, Holt bleeding from a cut he hadn't noticed, Singh lying still in the sand. He thought of Ryan again, of the ruin, of the scream that still echoed behind his skull. And he knew, with cold certainty, the valley wasn't going to let them leave. The desert's silence after the chaos was worse than the screams. Kane sat with his rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the horizon where the ruin pulsed faintly like a dying ember. The shapes that had clawed their way from the sand still lingered, packing at the valley's edge, bound to the ruin but patient enough to wait. Morales broke the silence first, his voice brittle. "You saw it right. I'm not crazy. Soviet gear, old uniforms. Some of those things had dog tags." Holt rubbed his face with bloody fingers. "Didn't look like any Soviets I remember studying. Those weren't men. They weren't anything." Kane said nothing. He could still hear the sound, the scream that had rattled his teeth. It wasn't just noise. It had been inside his chest, inside his skull, vibrating through marrow. His brother's face flashed again in memory, empty eyes watching. He tried to focus. He had to. "We need a new rally point," Kane said at last. His voice sounded foreign, scraped raw. "Satellite extraction won't work if we're inside whatever that is." Holt gave a hollow laugh. "You think HQ is coming for us? After what we just walked into, they'll bury this, just like they buried the rest." Kane turned to him sharply. "What do you mean, the rest?" Holt hesitated, jaw tight. "You really never read the file before they shipped us out here, did you?" Kane frowned. "We were told it was recon. Confirm enemy movement, map the terrain, nothing more." "Bullshit," Holt snapped, louder than he meant to. He lowered his voice quickly, glancing back at the horizon. "This isn't the first squad sent here. It's not even the fifth. You think all those Soviet uniforms just crawled out of the ground on their own? They've been feeding this place men for decades." Morales barked a sharp laugh, the sound edged with hysteria. "Feeding? Jesus, man, you hear yourself. What the hell is this, a sacrifice pit?" Holt's eyes didn't waver. "You saw it too." Kane's stomach tightened. His men were unraveling, and part of him couldn't blame them. He looked at Singh's body lying still in the sand. Singh had been the quiet one, the steady one, always with a joke under his breath when things got too heavy. Now he was just weight, silent and heavy, refusing to be left behind. Morales shifted closer, his voice lower now. "Sarge, we can't go back there, not to the ruin, not even close. Whatever that was, it wanted us, and it'll want us again." Kane nodded slowly. "We're not going back. We head north toward the ridge. If we can put enough distance between us and that thing, we signal extraction again. If command ignores us, we find our own way out." No one argued, not because they believed him, but because belief didn't matter anymore. Motion was survival. They packed in silence. Holt checked his ammo, every click too sharp in the night. Morales tied Singh's body tighter in the canvas, muttering under his breath with every knot, prayers or curses Kane couldn't tell. Kane adjusted his pack, then paused as the wind shifted. A smell reached them. It was faint, almost too faint to notice, but Kane froze. Not gunpowder, not rot. Sweet, cloying, like flowers left too long in the sun. He knew it instantly because it didn't belong here. Nothing bloomed in this desert. Nothing sweet lived here. Holt stiffened. "You smell that?" Morales shook his head. "I smell blood, that's it." Kane scanned the dark, his pulse climbing. "Weapons ready, we move now." They began the climb up the dune. The sand shifted underfoot, every step a struggle against gravity and exhaustion. Singh's weight slowed them, but Kane wouldn't release him, no matter how much his arms burned. Halfway up, Holt froze. His rifle jerked up, aimed at the ridge. Kane followed his gaze. Something stood at the crest, silhouetted against the faint glow of the stars. Too far to see clearly, but the outline was human, broad-shouldered still. Kane's throat closed. "Ryan," the word escaped before he could stop it. The figure tilted its head. Holt whispered, "What the hell are you saying, Kane?" The silhouette didn't move. Then slowly, it lifted one arm and pointed back toward the valley. The ruin pulsed again, brighter, the light crawling like veins across the sand. When Kane looked back, the figure was gone. He realized his hands were shaking. "Move," he ordered hoarsely. "Don't look back, move." They crested the ridge and descended into darkness, every step heavier than the last, every breath poisoned by the memory of the figure's gesture. Kane couldn't shake the thought. Whatever waited in Kandahar wasn't finished with them. And if Ryan was there, if his brother's ghost, or whatever wore his face, was part of it, then Kane wasn't sure whether he feared death or reunion. The ridge gave them temporary cover, but the night felt wrong, like it was listening. The stars burned faint but sharp, too steady, as if painted onto the sky instead of alive. Morales kept muttering, his lips moving fast, breath uneven. Holt's eyes flicked constantly between the shadows, finger twitching near the trigger. Kane led, forcing his mind to stay focused. The sand crunched under boots, Singh's body dragging with every step, the canvas rasping against stone. The sound carried too far in the silence, too loud. He felt like they were announcing themselves to something vast and unseen. "Stop," Holt hissed suddenly. He crouched, rifle up, scanning the rocks ahead. Kane dropped low, Morales nearly stumbling as he followed. At first, Kane saw nothing, then a glimmer, a faint reflection tucked in the rocks, 30 meters ahead. A lens! Kane's hands signaled silence. He crept forward, belly to the sand, inch by inch until he could make out the shape. A camera, half buried in dust, lens cracked but pointed at the valley they'd just left. He reached for it, brushing away grit. The casing was stamped with Cyrillic letters, faded but legible, Soviet issue. His stomach tightened. This wasn't just a battlefield, it had been an observation post. Someone had been watching, recording. Kane turned it over, and his chest locked. On the back, carved with something sharp, was a single word in English. "Run!" He shoved it into his pack before the others could see. "Nothing useful," he lied, rising to his feet. "Let's keep moving." But Morales caught the flicker in his expression. His eyes narrowed. He said nothing, but Kane felt the weight of his suspicion. The desert wind rose suddenly, carrying grit into their faces. Kane wiped his eyes, but when his vision cleared, the valley behind them was shifting. The ruins' glow was stronger now, pulsing in rhythm. The sand rippled outward from it, waves that moved too slow to be natural, rolling dunes bending like water under the moonlight. "Christ," Holt whispered, his voice cracked. "It's spreading." Morales dropped Singh's body with a grunt. "We are dead. We're already dead. You don't come back from this." "Pick him up," Kane snapped. His voice had steel again, but inside he felt the same dread gnawing. "No," Morales spat. "I'm not dying because you can't let go of a corpse. Singh's gone. We're next if we don't move faster." Kane closed the distance in 2 strides, his hand gripping Morales' vest. Their faces nearly touched. "You drop him again," Kane growled, "and I'll leave you here for the things in that sand. Understand?" Morale's jaw clenched, but he lifted the body again. Holt said nothing, but his eyes followed the exchange, calculating. They pressed north, exhaustion deepening. Time felt fractured, minutes stretching, seconds vanishing. At some point, Kane realized he could hear something beneath the wind. Whispers. Not words, not yet, just the cadence of speech. Too many voices, too soft to understand, but close, always close. Then clearer. Kane. His heart hammered. He glanced back. Holt and Morales were too far behind to have spoken. Another whisper, this time in a voice he knew. Ryan. He stumbled, nearly dropping Singh's weight. His brother's voice, not memory, not inside his head. It was outside, moving with them, always at his shoulder. Kane, it said again, faint, pulling him toward the valley. He bit down hard on his tongue until he tasted blood, forcing focus back. He couldn't let it win, couldn't listen. But Holt had stopped, staring past Kane, rifle slack in his hands. His face was pale, eyes wide. What do you hear? Kane demanded. Holt shook his head slowly. Not what, who? Morales shivered. Don't say it. Her voice, Holt whispered, like he was confessing. My sister, she's calling me. The desert closed in tighter, whispers swelling. Too many voices overlapping now. Families, lovers, friends, all long dead, all beckoning. Kane's skin crawled. It wasn't just ghosts. It was hunger, pulling at their souls through familiar faces, familiar sounds. Move, Kane ordered, harsher than ever. Now. But Holt didn't move. His rifle clattered to the sand. His lips parted, and tears slid down his cheeks. She's right there, he whispered. I can see her. Kane spun, but there was nothing, just rock and sand. Then Holt started walking back toward the valley. Kane lunged, grabbing his arm. Holt, look at me. Holt's eyes were glassy, fixed on something Kane couldn't see. He tore himself free with a strength that didn't seem his own. Let me go, Holt said. I have to go. Morales cursed, shifting Singh's weight awkwardly as he pulled his sidearm. He's gone, Sarge. He's already gone. Stand down, Kane barked, but it was too late. Holt broke into a run, straight toward the ruins' glow, disappearing into the dunes. His scream came seconds later, carried by the wind, long and ragged until it cut off. The whispers surged, louder, closer. Morales' face was ashen. We're next, man, we're next. Kane's fists clenched. His brother's voice whispered again, softer now, almost tender. Ryan's waiting. And Kane realized with bone-deep certainty, the ruin didn't just kill, it collected. The wind whipped across the desert, stinging Kane's eyes as Holt's scream bled into silence. Morales' breathing came ragged, unsteady, a mix of fear and fury. Kane stood rigid, muscles trembling, listening to the whispers coil tighter around them. The voices no longer hid in the background. They pressed in, crowding his skull, each syllable a needle scraping against thought. He shook his head violently. We keep moving, north, away from the valley. Morales' laugh was sharp, almost hysterical. You didn't see it, did you? He didn't just run, he saw someone. They're showing us things. They're in our heads, Kane. We're walking meat to them. Shut up and walk, Kane snapped. His tone was clipped, cold, but inside, dread was spreading like a slow poison. They trudged onward, Singh's dead weight between them. Every step was a war against exhaustion. The sand dragged at their boots, the night gnawed at their strength. Twice Kane thought he saw shapes in the dunes, figures crouching low, moving parallel, always keeping distance. Shadows, maybe tricks of the light, but he couldn't shake the sense they were being herded. An hour later, or a minute, time had no meaning anymore. They found the remnants of a Soviet checkpoint. Rusted corrugated metal, a collapsed radio tower, and shattered crates. Morales dropped Singh with a grunt. We can't carry him anymore. He's slowing us down. You know it. Holt's dead because of this. Kane glared, but his grip on discipline faltered. His body ached, shoulders burning from the drag. He looked down at Singh, skin pale in the moonlight, eyes half-lidded, mouth slightly open. For a fleeting second, he swore Singh's lips moved. Kane knelt, he leaned closer. A whisper, not from outside this time, from Singh's body. "Ryan!" Kane staggered back, bile rising in his throat. Singh's lips curled, barely perceptible, into something that was not a smile but a recognition. His eyes rolled, pupils catching faint light. Morales swore under his breath and raised his pistol. "That's not Singh anymore." Kane snapped his hand out, knocking the weapon aside. "No." "He's gone, man," Morales' voice cracked, but the muzzle was already back on target. "Whatever's in him, it's using him." Kane's heart thundered. The whisper hadn't been Singh, it had been him, his brother. "Lower it," Kane ordered, his voice steady though his insides churned. Morales hesitated, sweat dripping down his face, pistol trembling. "You're not thinking straight, Sarge. You hear them too. They're in your head." Before Kane could answer, Singh's body convulsed. Not like a corpse jolting, like something inside was stretching, pushing outward, testing the limits of its shell. His jaw cracked wider than natural, his chest heaved though no breath filled it. Then he stilled again, completely motionless. Morales fired. The gunshot shattered the night, echoing through the dunes. The bullet punched through Singh's skull, snapping his head sideways. His body collapsed limp once more. Kane rounded on Morales, slamming him against the rusted metal wall of the checkpoint. "You disobey me again, I put you down myself." Morales shoved back, fury and terror tangled in his eyes. He was gone, you saw it, don't you dare pretend you did. Their shouting carried, bouncing off the ruins. The desert seemed to listen. Then, faintly at first, came an answering sound. Drums. Low, hollow thuds rising from the valley, pulsing in rhythm with the ruins' glow. Kane froze, Morales' eyes widened. Neither spoke, but both knew they weren't alone. A rustle in the sand drew their attention to the dunes. Figures stood at the ridge, silhouettes cut against the moonlight. Dozens, maybe more, unmoving, watching. Kane's throat tightened. "Get down now." They slid behind the collapsed crates, breathing shallow, eyes fixed on the ridge. The figures remained silent, their outlines blurred as if the desert itself shaped them. One stepped forward, and the whispers surged again, voices overlapping, swelling into a chorus. Morales clamped his hands over his ears, rocking slightly, teeth bared against the sound. "Make it stop, Kane, please make it stop." Kane gripped his rifle tighter, the steel grounding him. His own name threaded through the chorus again, intimate, pleading in his brother's voice. The figure raised its arm, pointing directly at their hiding place. The drums quickened. The figure's arm stayed rigid, an accusation etched in silhouette. The air grew heavy, pressing on Kane's lungs. The sand at his knees vibrated with the rhythm of the drums, as if the desert itself was a skin stretched over something vast and beating beneath. Morales was shaking violently, his teeth chattering though the air was warm. "They see us," he hissed, almost childlike. "They see us, Kane. We're not supposed to be here." "Quiet," Kane snapped, though his own throat was dry. He counted the figures, 12 on the ridge, maybe 15. No weapons visible, no movement except the one that pointed. Still, the weight of their gaze was worse than rifles. The whispers rose in unison, and this time Kane understood fragments. Stay, belong, come back, overlapping, echoing, pulling. The sound wasn't carried by the wind, it was in the marrow, in the rhythm of their blood. Morales couldn't take it anymore. He bolted from cover, stumbling into the open with his sidearm raised. "Back off," he screamed, firing 3 shots into the ridge. Muzzle flashes tore through the night. The bullets never reached. They vanished midair, dissolving like droplets in firelight. The figures didn't flinch. Morales kept shooting, his voice breaking with every pull of the trigger. "Stay away, stay away." Kane sprang up, tackling him from behind, forcing him into the sand. The pistol skidded across the ground. "Stop, you're making it worse." But Morales' eyes were wild, pupils blown wide. "You don't get it, man, they want us. We're already theirs." Kane gritted his teeth, pressing his forearm into Morales' chest until he stopped thrashing. He looked back to the ridge. The figures were gone. Only sand remained, shifting under moonlight, smooth and untouched. The drums faded, replaced by silence so complete Kane could hear the blood in his ears. He released Morales, who curled into himself, gasping, muttering prayers under his breath. Kane retrieved the sidearm and checked his own rifle, hands steady out of habit alone. Inside, he was unraveling. The desert looked empty again, but he knew it was. They were being pulled, tested, and measured like animals in a pen. Singh was gone, Holt was gone, Morales was breaking. And him, he wasn't sure how much longer he could resist the voice calling his name. Kane stared at the horizon, where the first faint glow of dawn brushed the sand. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw movement in the light, shadows bending in shapes not human. "We move at sunrise," Kane said flatly. Morales didn't answer, only rocked in silence. Kane tightened his grip on the rifle and forced the words out again, sharper, as if command alone could hold them together. "We move at sunrise." But even as he said it, the whispers laughed softly in his ears.